welcome once again to So Fresh, So Prince. This is going to be an episode chock full of episode-y goodness.
Of course.
There's so much happening in tonight's episode, not just of the episode we watched tonight, but of the podcast itself.
Yeah.
Because we have to talk about the news that everybody has been talking about.
You know.
The Fresh Prince Reboot.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned last week in our short opening, you're welcome.
Yeah, we definitely want you guys to, feel all the love, and everything. But, we thank you for the thank yous.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All we ask for, just keep listening, keep telling your friends, keep this conversation going with us.
Look at how far it's gotten us so far.
Exactly. That's all it takes is you guys and this conversation. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it happy. We're getting all the way to Overbrook Entertainment.
Yeah.
We've got it all laid out. You
Yeah.
know, we don't want to have to keep cutting Karen Parsons' interview week after week after week.
No, I mean, we might run out of time, and we don't want to take all of the credit for it. Just the portion in which that we influenced.
Exactly.
I think that's a good word for it.
Yep. Nobody was doing a Fresh Prince podcast 7 weeks ago. Nobody was talking about a reboot 1 week ago.
No?
That time parallel just works out.
Yeah.
So you're welcome.
Yeah.
The one thing that we do know for sure, just to speculate on this episode, we can guarantee with no authority whatsoever that Will Smith will be played by Jaden Smith in the reboot.
I will neither confirm nor deny that, but, it's a very good possibility.
Well, I mean, again, this is the man, Will Smith in this case, who looked at the cinematic history of the past 30 years and said, you know what really resonates with me? The Karate Kid. And you know who I think the perfect person to take on the mantle of Ralph Macchio is? Jaden Smith.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, he clearly believes that Jaden Smith is the greatest actor of all time. And he can take on any role. And if anyone is going to take on the role of Will Smith, other than Will Smith is going to want it to be Jaden Smith.
Well, I mean, he spent the most time with him, so, I mean, would it be considered method acting?
It's a role he's been preparing for his entire life. He was literally born
so he
into
was
this
waiting
role.
for him to turn 17, 18, so he can properly fill this role.
I feel it's a combination of that, and Willow had to get to the age where she could play Ashley.
I did not think about that.
That's
See, you learn something. The more you know, you just learn something new every week.
You learn something new every week.
Now, the question is, will he have to audition? And if he auditions, does he audition with everybody else or in the living room?
He's not going to have to audition.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, think about it. It's like, okay, we can have anyone to play the Ralph Macchio role in Karate Kid. And we're going to audition every little kid. You got to believe, flat out, no questions asked, that Liam's Hemsworth is going to outshine Jaden Smith in the role of the Karate Kid.
Yeah. I mean, he is a Hemsworth. He comes from that Asgardian bloodline.
It's true. He has that, not just that bloodline, but that jawline.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a serious jawline right there. That's not even a just strong jaw. That's an unbreakable jaw.
Exactly. So, no, Jaden will not be auditioning. Willow will not be auditioning. Janet Hubert, she will be auditioning.
It's still too soon, but I'm not going to stop you. I mean, it's already out there in the world.
All right. So is there anything else we need to touch on about this reboot? Because at this point, we literally know nothing besides the fact that Will Smith says he will not be involved on camera. Do we have anything else we need to touch on?
No, I mean, I think other than Carlton coming back, but that's the big question mark. That's the big elephant in the room,
Because we talked about this in our pilot episode, that there is prime real estate right now where all you have to do, you get Karen Parsons, you get Tatiana Ali, you have them move into a house together in Bel Air. They all have kids. You've got that mixed family, fish out of water dynamic because Ashley, she's been in New York. She's been doing the music thing. She's coming back home to live with Hillary's family, who now has this weird aunt And that would be the perfect way, segue everything back in. And then, only then, once it's super popular, does Will Smith say, you know what? I think I am going to show up on camera.
Well, Overbrook, hope you're listening,
We are just giving these ideas to you, seriously.
Just drop a little crumb here and there. But that's okay. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Okay.
And speaking of fish out of water,
this was quite the episode for a fish out of water, and this episode felt way too real.
Yeah, I think they got really comfortable with this episode.
And the weirdest part about it, they touched on some really heavy stuff in this episode, but boy, oh boy, did they do their damnedest to make this thing funny.
Oh yeah, I mean they started off with the laughs. I will give them that.
Did they ever? Oh my gosh, did they ever?
I mean it's just such an amazing thing because you look at even the opening before we even get to the opening credits, like just the first 3 minutes were just jam packed. You put Hillary up against Ashley. You put Will up against Uncle Phil.
So, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Tell us, Lorenzo, what happened in this episode?
All right, so, pretty much. We open up the show with Hillary and Ashley somewhat having to deal with responsibility. Obviously, Hillary should be able to deal with responsibility of watching her little sister because she's the big sister. But no, she doesn't want to. And Ashley shouldn't have to deal with watching her big sister because she's the little sister. And all of this is because Jeffrey's off for the week. And Phil and Aunt Viv are going away to the Firth, Wind, and Mire. It's still just so hard to say what Earth, Wind, and Fire. Okay, Firth, Wind, and Mire company retreat in Palm Springs. And all of the crazy things that happen in between Carlton trying to get Mr. Firth's Benz up to Palm Springs. Like I said, there was so much that happened in the beginning. On
paper, that idea makes perfect sense. But to backtrack a little bit, in the cold open of this show, Jeffrey's on vacation. Hillary doesn't want to watch Ashley. Ashley doesn't want to watch Hillary. Will wants to go to Palm Springs. Carlton isn't even thinking about going to Palm Springs. Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv don't want anyone else to come to Palm Springs. Will tries to finagle his way into Palm Springs by offering Mr. Firth, who is not driving to Palm Springs because his wife just got her pilot's license and is going to take everyone there in a helicopter, which is really impressive considering they had about 35 people all at that house, and according to the episode, she took everyone.
Some of them were hanging off of the propellers. That's what took them so long.
That's an amazing image. I'm just imagining Uncle Phil.
No, I think Uncle Phil would have to be inside as the anchor.
Yeah.
Everybody else would have to be there to balance out.
And Will's solution to get into the Palm Springs weekend is he offers Mr. Firth the chance to let Will drive Mr. Firth's Benz to Palm Springs so he has something to drive while he's there. But he doesn't say, I should drive it. He says a responsible young man should drive it. And Mr. Firth says, you're absolutely right.
Carlton
should drive it.
But I mean, within that exchange right there, that sets up the whole entire episode.
Oh, does it ever?
In such a light way, and we just start adding pounds on after that. Because he sits down and Will is just hurt because his chance of seeing them, the dental floss bikinis in Palm Springs are shot now because Carlton is driving. And he says it in the cheekiest way possible. It's a black thing, isn't it? And we don't quite get it. We just think it's jokes. But
it turns out to be one of the heaviest things that sets up the episode and foreshadows everything else that happens in this episode, because inevitably Will's not just going to sit on his hands when he knows Carlton is going to be driving. So Carlton's driving. He's driving the way Carlton drives. He's got a bag of Oreos. He's singing A, B, C, D, E, F, E, H. I got a gal in Kalamazoo.
Yeah. And then he finds out that Will is in the car by him popping up from the back seat in full Freddy Krueger garb.
Oh, which is so timely.
Yeah.
Kids might know who Freddy Krueger is today. But
I mean, they might know from, like, Party City and the costumes, but they don't know, like, the real fear that Freddy Krueger has. He's basically enabled a whole generation of adults because of him.
But what's amazing is, so the guy who created the movie on which the TV show Scream is based on was originally known for slasher movies, and one of his most famous ones was a series called The Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, still have nightmares about that.
Where Freddy Krueger was this murderer who was killing kids, and after he's put to death, he comes back in children's dreams and starts killing them in their dreams, and then they die in real life.
Yeah.
And that's what Will wants to show to Carlton while he's behind the wheel.
Yeah, now you brought up something earlier. Now we've looked this up because we do our research. We definitely do. We actually Google mapped the route from Bel Air to Palm Springs. At what point would it be too far for you to turn around?
Yeah. So just to give you a little context on that, it's roughly about a 90-minute drive from Bel Air to Palm Springs, give or take. Especially at night, there's no one there, and it gets down to this point where the only point that's really the point of no return is once you get down to a certain point on the 210 expressway where it's really just two lanes, one going north and one going south. This was not where he was. He was pretty much still on the 405 at this point, and Lorenzo's laughing right now because when Will pops out, Carlton is basically down the street from his house.
Yeah.
And at that point, Carlton's first response should have been, I'm just going to take you home, Will.
Yeah.
But no, Carlton doesn't do that. Carlton says, "If I will give you an Oreo if you behave."
Like a civilized person.
Yes, the Oreo offers Will an Oreo.
Yeah, you know. I mean, an Oreo in that 405 traffic, that was enough to say, you know what, I'm willing to deal with Will this time.
So Will keeps popping jokes.
Yeah.
He's there in his loud graffitied pants, and he sticks his head out of Mr. First's sunroof, and all of a sudden, his head is gone. And he says, "Done, Carlton. I really like that head. Now we gotta go back and get it."
This is where Will is just, he's not mature at all. Like, I mean, everybody has their road trips, jokes and whatnot, you know, where you're about an hour and a half or an hour into it. But this is probably like 20 minutes into it.
And they really, really have to pack these jokes in early because they drop some seriously heavy themes on this episode. Themes that are still relevant today. Hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Yes. And here's the funniest thing about it. When we get to the point in the episode where they realize that they're lost, because that happens in all sitcoms, and we realize they didn't bring a map.
Because that happens in all sitcoms.
You know, apparently, when you go on road trips in sitcoms, poor planning is a part of it. Because you can't have a map. But, I mean, you know, that's when we start to see that it's about to get heavy. That this episode really kind of, it takes a turn. And it takes a turn in a way that it went from funny to serious real quick. But the thing that hit me the most was, you don't have a map? I mean, I understand. This is before we all had smartphones and everything, and the map was like a handful. Like, the map was like the windshield.
Absolutely.
You know, like, so if somebody opens up a map, you can't drive.
Kids, maps used to be on paper. You couldn't just go to Google Maps and
Yeah.
get directions from one point to another.
Paper
No,
is a thing that's on books that come in a library that you actually have to carry around, and they're heavy. I'm getting too deep. I'm sorry. I'm pulling myself out, going down the rabbit hole.
it's all good. And again, they didn't know this at the time, but Carlton is moving slowly, trying to figure out where they are. They get pulled over, and then the cop is played by Hank Azaria.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Hank Azaria is the voice of Moe the bartender on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
It's like you can't just take one away from the other. Carlton got pulled over by Moe. What are we doing here, people? The Simpsons was on at that point.
He might have had a week off or something, you know.
Maybe, but I mean, first we have Kathy Griffin.
Yeah.
Then we have Hank Azaria. It's just one of those things where it's like you have this very deep episode, and perhaps in hindsight they knew exactly what they were doing because they looked and said, okay, we're going to do a really heavy episode and we have to keep it light, so we're going to figure out as many ways to keep it light. What's light? The Simpsons are light.
I think that's why they got Moe. You know, you might have figured it out. That's exactly why they got him.
All right, I'm comfortable with that.
They said, cut Moe's lines in half for The Simpsons this week. We're going to need him.
Hashtag Moe the traffic cop.
Yeah. But, I mean, even the funniest part about it was how they played the jokes in with the seriousness of it. Like, and they just kept touching on this is a black thing without even having to say it, because Will obviously has been down this road before. Carlton has not, though he is pre-law, and he can finagle his way out of it in his mind. But it's the exchange.
Essentially, Will, at every point after Officer Moe pulls the two of them over, he knows what Officer Moe is going to do. He says, Carlton, keep your hands on the wheel. Carlton ignores him and tries to shake the officer's hand. The officer says, put your hands on the wheel. Will says he's about to ask for your license. The officer asks for his license. After Carlton says something stupid, Will says, we're going to have to get out of the car now. And at every turn, Carlton says, Will, what are you talking about? But the moment that Carlton says, this isn't even our car, Will just drops his head. And the scariest thing about this was, if they had gotten rid of that laugh track and just put some ominous strings underneath it, this could have been an episode of Empire.
Very true. Very true.
Very deep, very quickly, even to the point where when Will gets out of the car, the first thing he does is just lay down on the hood.
And Carlton looks so befuddled.
Completely befuddled. This is so over Carlton's head. And to the point in this series, this is the culmination of just how different Carlton and Will are, and how Carlton was really put here to be the antithesis to Will, and the writers found a way to really use that in this case.
Yeah, and I mean, we find out who Carlton is on a deeper level this time.
Which is very, very naive.
I'd say first world naive. That's a wonderful looking animal there. Oh, those are sharp teeth. Wow. Oh, now he's eating my leg.
Well, and one thing we didn't point out is one of the ways that Mr. Firth tried to entice Carlton to drive the car was he said, if you come, you can play golf with us, and the chicks in Palm Springs wear the teeniest of bikinis. And Carlton's response was,
I'd sure love a round of golf. Yeah, but Carlton isn't exactly the hero in this.
Sadly, not.
But it's just, I mean, I think we've had the introduction of Carlton, but I mean, now we really get to see that, you know, he's Daddy's favorite little boy. You know, if a teddy bear was to come to life and turn 17, I think it would look and act a lot like Carlton.
That is very true. And finally, he has some character to him. He got character. He wasn't just an archetype.
Yeah.
And that affectation that he's been speaking with for the past couple episodes, it is gone.
It's gone.
Good riddance. He is a real live boy now. He's no longer a wooden puppet.
Yeah. But I mean, I definitely did see how they set it up for Will to be the strong leader in this whole entire episode.
Well, I wouldn't say he was the strongest of leaders, because a leader leads a person to water.
Didn't say good. I said strong. A strong leader can also lead you to jail.
That's very true. But in this particular case, there was never a moment where Will just said to Carlton, "Look, Carlton, I know we have our differences, but please, I am begging you. I will do whatever you want. Just please do exactly what I say."
I don't think Carlton is able to think on that. I think he's so Banks programmed.
Yeah. And
I would love to believe that. I mean, but that's every situation. It's like when you're out on Friday night and you let your somewhat drunk friend drive home because we live about 2 miles away from home, and you get pulled over and you say, whatever you do, don't go into detail. Guy. When you get that slur in the finger, you know you're in trouble.
And Carlton, in this particular case, is drunk on that Bel Air juice. He just does not get that there is a real world where there are real consequences to everything you say, which is why when they end up back at the precinct and they're being interrogated at the precinct, Will tells Carlton, "Don't talk. I'm going to get us out of this." Carlton ignores him.
Because he's pre-law.
So the officer asks very basic questions. "Where are you coming from?"
L.A.
"Well, not exactly," says Carlton. "We live in Bel Air. We live 2 doors down from Ron and Nancy Reagan."
Oh, okay. All right.
And obviously, no one's going to believe that,
No.
even if it is true.
No.
But they end up getting themselves thrown directly in jail because Carlton starts to act like Uncle Phil.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to be a 40-year-old, giant, imposing man with the voice of Shredder. And you can get your way.
But he's playing the Uncle Phil that is the now Uncle Phil. He's playing the chuckling family dad Uncle Phil. He's not playing the lawyer Uncle Phil.
And even more than that, it's like, Uncle Phil comes in and he's speaking like this. And Carlton comes in and he's trying to speak like this the entire time. He's basically a puppy waiting for someone to throw the ball.
See, he went from being a teddy bear to being Pinocchio to being a puppy. See, he's not... He's a whale out of water here. He's Nemo. That's what it is. He's Nemo here. We're finding Carlton. Hashtag finding Carlton.
And in this case, Will is absolutely Dory in this situation.
I can completely agree. But I think it's funny how they played on the interrogation scenes. Like, oh, okay. Oh, well, you live in Bel Air next to the Reagans. Oh, okay. All right. And this Benz. Oh, okay. That's wonderful. Oh, do you have a unicorn in your back pocket? No, okay. All right.
They did exactly what people are protesting today. They looked at them and said, "You're black. You're in a Mercedes that doesn't belong to you. You stole it."
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, they have to pivot from that back into the comedy.
Of course.
So both Carlton and Will, they get a phone call.
For the people who don't know this, when you do get interrogated or brought to lockup, you get one phone call. Some of you might never know this because you're upstanding citizens and you'll never experience this, but that one phone call can be a night in jail or home free.
So, who does Carlton call? Daddy. So he calls up Mr. Firth, and tries to get him to put his dad on the phone so Daddy can come in and save the day. But crazy old Mrs. Firth, when Carlton says, "I'm in jail, I need to talk to my father," she says, "You got into Yale? That's so wonderful. I'll tell your father. It's too loud in here. Goodbye."
Because that's what happens when you go on a law retreat. You don't think you always get into jail. Yale, when somebody goes to a law retreat.
But if everything that's happening in jail is the realest part of this episode. The second realest thing is the fact that when you are watching football, you're not paying attention to the phone at all. And you're letting your wife answer the phone, and she's not paying attention because she's either zoned out somewhere or she's loving you enough to make you some snacks for you and your friends, and you're very lucky if that ends up being the case.
Or you're in Palm Springs and you've had a couple of adult beverages.
Ain't that the truth? So Will knows better. He doesn't try to call the same person. He calls the house. But Hillary, she doesn't have time to answer the phone.
No.
She's sitting right next to it, but she tries to command Ashley to answer the phone.
And that never works out.
No. When you get commanded to do anything by an older sibling, the answer is no. So Jeffrey answers the phone, and the minute Jeffrey hears that he has to do anything, his response is, "I'm on vacation. You can talk to me when your parents are back. I am done being abused by this family."
Yes. And not verbatim, but, he's paraphrasing. But that's pretty much what it is. It's like, hey, I know it's your day off of work, but can you do this one thing for me?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
I don't think so.
And when they ask for another phone call afterwards, that's the moment they get locked up in a jail cell.
Not before the joke, though, because we got to put the joke before this heavy moment.
By all means.
Master Will says, "Can I get another phone call because my butler hung up on me?" And the writers, they knew how to balance out the heaviness of the situation and the jokes because, even the cop got to be funny. He said, "Oh, okay. Why don't you call Nancy Reagan up while you're at it?" Yeah.
So once they're in the jail cell, I really want to know what the impetus was for how they kept things light in the jail cell, because it was either drug-induced or they have the biggest theater nerd sitting in that room, and I would like to shake that person's hand, because Will tries everything he can to keep Carlton calm. And I guess his first instinct was to get them to sing a Negro spiritual.
Yeah, because, when you're being oppressed behind bars, it's just a natural way to go, right?
Yep. So he comes in and it's like, "Carlton, let's sing. I'll start. When Israel was in Egypt's land,
let my people go."
And then out of nowhere, Bob the gangbanger is sitting there in the corner, and it comes down to, "Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt." Like, where did this come from?
Sidebar: we might have to find a song for you to sing every episode.
I will not complain about this, but it's like after. And then even after he finishes, "Let my people go," there's this awkward moment of applause and then silence, followed by, "Clap your hands, clap your thighs." It's like, where did this come from? I love it, but at the same time, it's just one of those things where I want to know what the impetus for this was, and I want to shake that person in the writer's room's hand.
Part of me really wants to believe that the truth of the situation, that their butler hung up on them, that their high-powered attorney, lawyer, father is on a retreat, and they're driving the owner's Benz because his wife flew his helicopter there. I really want to believe that they just said the truth is stranger than fiction in this. So why not make the fiction 10 times bigger?
Because the way they set all this up is Will is just afraid of this guy, with the understanding that if a white guy is in jail, he did something really bad.
Really bad. And here's one thing that I understand. Tell me if I'm crazy, but the quietest people are normally the most dangerous.
Absolutely. Because you don't know what's going on in their head. They're thinking something that they don't want to say.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't really know if his name was Bob. Will just decided to give him a name so that way he'd feel safer.
Yeah, I can see that. But at the same time, I really don't know. Even if you're looking the way he did, because he was dressed in full motorcycle regalia, he started singing Barry Manilow at one point.
Hey, we all have our Manilow moments.
Oh, yeah, no, we love Barry Manilow. There's no question about that. But you're not afraid of Barry Manilow. You're not afraid of, I've been alive forever, I wrote the very first song.
well, this might be Bob's backstory. He might have been singing Barry Manilow in a motorcycle gang bar, and somebody decided to make fun of him, and he picked a fight with him. And that's how he ended up in jail.
That's what I'm going to assume is going to happen. Like, I'm just leaving it there.
We'll just leave Bob alone. Okay.
Well, we can't leave him alone entirely. There's still more of Bob in the episode. But Will and Carlton reach their breaking point, thanks in no small part to Bob. And they look at each other and say, Will says, I know how to get us out of this.
And that's normally when you get scared.
Yeah, absolutely. So he goes up to the cops and says, my partner here is ready to confess.
Because Will can't be the ringleader in all this.
Well, he ends up being the ringleader, obviously. Because Carlton's not going to do it.
No.
Not at all. So he looks at the situation and says, okay, white people are watching the game. We need something bad enough to get local news to interject into a nationally televised football game. So what do you do to get white people in Palm Springs to stop watching football?
You get two black guys to confess to carjacking.
And Will puts on a show.
Yeah.
He is doing his best Black Panther, which for some reason he's dressed like a pirate. He's got his do-rag and like sunglasses with one eye popped out and a giant earring. I don't know where he got all this stuff, but apparently he did.
Bob had it in his back pocket.
Yep.
We're just going to assume Bob was helping him out.
Absolutely. And Carlton, his confession is one word.
Daddy.
Daddy!
I can't bring myself to do that. I just But here's the one thing that I don't think a lot of people think about. The Bankses are at their retreat. Now, mind you, Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv are the two black people amongst the sea of Jewish and white lawyers.
Absolutely.
As they watch their nephew and their son on national TV pretty much saying that they've been stealing cars. At that moment, the mortifying look on their face was obviously sitcom-y. But how do you feel on the inside that your son and your nephew are on TV in jail? Like, that...
Well, and this is where I'm actually very impressed by what the writers set up, because they do find out from Mrs. Firth that Carlton said he's getting into Yale.
Yeah.
And they know there is no way that Will is driving up to Palm Springs 5 nights a week and jacking cars.
Yeah.
And the only thing they know even more securely than that is that Carlton is not driving up to Palm Springs 5 nights a week and jacking cars.
And returning them because he didn't like the upholstery.
Exactly.
Because that's why carjackers don't steal your car.
Of course. Lousy upholstery. And they're smart people because they know that Yale rhymes with jail. So they know what happened, and they go straight down to that police precinct and get everything figured out in the biggest and best Uncle Phil way that you possibly can.
But don't forget the opening act, Aunt Viv. Because we love Aunt Viv. Okay?
Love her.
Well, we love the setup of her character. We just love how she moves and how she acts. And Aunt Viv went into full on mom form.
Oh, did she ever? Although her response to what the situation was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she said, "This is the biggest mistake since Mayberry RFD." Now, we actually had to look this one up because we were not watching the Andy Griffith Show.
No, we were actually enjoying life outside.
Yeah, I don't think we weren't even born when the Andy Griffith Show.
I mean, even when the reruns were on, we were probably out like at the park playing.
Yeah, but like the reruns were before our time. Like it made it onto TV Land, but like we weren't even really around for the Matlock reruns. You know? And
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I guess there was a writer with an old soul in that
I
room.
Suppose so. And Mayberry RFD was the spin-off to the Andy Griffith Show when Andy Griffith himself said, "No, I'm good. Yeah, you guys can keep doing the show, but I think I'm done.
Yeah,
we're all good."
Yeah, and on top of that, making Gomer Pyle the any kind of sheriff, probably wasn't a good idea on TV nor in real life.
No, but this show makes good decisions. They didn't give the Benz keys to Will. They gave it to Carlton. That's who you give the keys to.
Yeah, and I mean, though she said that, it was the setup for a good joke after.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, kudos to the writers.
And then Aunt Viv, when she is hassled by the cops, she takes her earrings off.
The universal sign of a woman fighting.
And that's when Uncle Phil steps in. And that's when Mr. Firth comes in and tells the cops that he had given Carlton the keys to his car. And we get an awesome Uncle Phil speech.
Yes.
He comes in and he says, "Did you call their lawyer?" "No, because I'm their lawyer." "Did you call their parents?" "No, because we're their parents." "So you're going to let them out now, or I will tie you up into litigation so far that your grandchildren are going to need attorney counsel."
I'm not sure if that was James Avery doing Uncle Phil or James Avery doing Batman. I mean, even on the show.
There's very little difference, as we've talked about in the past.
I think it's the suit. He's just minus the suit.
Uncle Phil knows deep down in his brain he could be Batman if he got himself in shape.
I think I think the suit is actually in the briefcase.
Exactly. It's in the back of the car at all times. It's in the briefcase. He's got the cowl, and Uncle Phil's excited because it covers up the double chin better than the beard can.
So we've revealed the true identity of all of the Batmans. It's James Avery.
Every single one.
Yeah.
Every single one. So they get home. They just, I'm assuming Mr. Firth said, "You know what? Take my car home. I'll get it from you later. We'll take the chopper. No big deal." And they do. And Hillary confesses that after having Ashley do all of her chores, she takes Ashley to a little cafe co-owned by John Cougar Mellencamp to have espresso. And what happens when you give a 9-year-old espresso?
Pretty much take about 100 Super Balls, put them in a slingshot in a small downtown LA or New York apartment, and just let them fly.
And little Ashley comes running in, all excited, talking to her mom about how she wants to play. And Aunt Viv, God bless her, doesn't have the energy, doesn't lose her cool on Ashley, just says, "I'm sorry, we don't have time. Jeffrey, will you please get her some warm milk?"
Yeah, and once again, kudos to the writers, because that balance of Will and Carlton just getting out of jail versus the Bel Air bubble that Hillary and Ashley have been living in, just kind of coming back together. They keep it funny with Ashley, and we're starting to see that Ashley is the comedic relief right now. She's the cute person that you get a laugh from to keep things too serious.
And we appreciate them kind of finding that role, even if right now she's basically taking on the role of the cute puppy.
Yeah.
And we need that, and she's going to get more character development. But right now, she's filling that role really well. So they do what they need to do. They put her to bed. They get Viv out of the room. They get Hillary out of the room. They get everyone but Will and Carlton out of the room. And Carlton, at this point, he's not upset about any of this. No. He just thinks the system did its job.
The system works.
The cops, they found some black kids in a nice car, and they lost a few hours of their lives, but everything ultimately got worked out. Not taking into account that there are lots of people who end up in that situation and then don't get out of it because they don't have an Uncle Phil
or
to come
Uncle
in and
Ferk.
save them.
And that's I think it was very smart of them to save that to the very last, because the show it's trying to be lighthearted, it's
Absolutely.
trying to be funny, it's trying to be family oriented, but you still do have to touch on some of these real life subjects because that's what's going to keep people watching. But it keeps you from getting real heavy in being a stumbling block in your way, because when Will finally does confront Carlton, he does it as if Carlton has offended him as much as the police officers did.
Even more so, actually.
Yeah. And it's like the beginning of the episode. It's a black thing. Like racism is just one of those things that I call it one of America's pillars. Ooh. It's what we're built on. And in many other isms that, we might not want to talk about, but it's something you do have to worry about. And that's not to shy away from it, but, it was a good way to take a look at it. Because Carlton, in his mind, the system worked. But in Will's mind, Will basically foreshadowed everything that happened. So in the sense that Carlton was finally taken out of his Bel Air bubble, you notice that he got really tender when he was approached, and he couldn't fathom the fact that he was discriminated. He just thought it was due process.
And really, really obsessed about the fact that the only problem that really happened was the fact that he forgot to bring a map. Right. None of this would have happened in Carlton's mind if he had just brought a map.
Yeah.
Not taking into account the fact that there was absolutely no reason to pull Will or Carlton over other than the fact that they were black guys in a Mercedes.
And that's pretty much it.
And this really does a nice job kind of setting the groundwork. Like, that spaghetti is starting to settle a little bit, because Will's getting a little more acquainted with the Bel Air lifestyle, but Carlton is starting to realize there's a lot more going on outside of that little bubble that he's been living in. Because he keeps saying over and over again in this episode, I'm so upset about this because I'm going to get kicked out of the Glee Club.
Yeah, that's the least of your worries.
That's the least of your worries.
You should be worried about Bob finding your address.
Exactly. I think you'd be worried about Bob finding a certain anatomy part.
Yeah. I don't think Carlton's gone that far down the road.
He doesn't know what dropping the soap means.
But I mean, even after we lose Will in the scene, Will is fed up. Will goes to sleep. Carlton finds Uncle Phil coming into the room, and he thinks, oh, this is my dad. This is lawyer Uncle Phil, And now he's starting to realize, wait, I might have been discriminated on. But let me double check with my dad. And it's like I keep saying, they keep trying to make Phil and Will kind of mold together, and they're doing a really good job of it. And with this episode, they hit it right on the head. They had Will and Uncle Phil agree on the same thing, on the same circumstances, with no arguments. Granted, they weren't in the room at the same time. But, I mean, I think that speaks to the power of the way they set up the scene. You don't have to have them in the same place, but they're influencing each other. And now Carlton feels like the fish out of water here.
Mostly because, at least what stuck with me more than anything else, was the fact that for his entire life, Carlton's been able to go to his father and say, I need advice on this, and Phil provides fatherly advice. And Carlton just flat out asks him, if you saw someone in a car driving 20 miles an hour on the expressway, wouldn't you pull them over? Phil doesn't have an answer. All he says is, I asked myself that very same question the first time I was pulled over, son. And then he walks away.
So there's really no answer for it.
And the only solution that we're seeing today, and mind you, this is 20 years later, is that we still haven't solved that problem.
We're still asking that same question.
And that's why the show was so touching, because the last thing you hear is Carlton say, I would have stopped. And then the camera pulls out, and it's silent.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed because they still wanted to keep it light and fluffy, because then they cut to the credits and they play the theme song.
Yeah, they got to in my mind, they got to the credits a lot faster than they normally would have.
Yeah, I mean, if they had really wanted to drive it home and not make this a lighthearted moment, that would have been in silence.
Oh, yeah.
And that audience just would have been left there to sit there and think.
Yeah, but I mean, I think with any and every generation, they want to make it lighthearted and make it seem like it just happens in TV, strange sitcoms, and this can't really happen in real life, even though it does. And it's like you said, credits to the writers, because they found a very interesting way to look at it, and they found a very interesting way to end it without answering the question, because we still haven't answered the question 20 some odd years later.
And I'm just very impressed more than anything else. And I had to take a few introspective moments about just how relevant this episode really is. Like, you could take this script and make it an episode of Blackish.
Yeah.
And nobody would bat an eye. Nobody would say this feels dated. Nobody would say this is out of place. Nobody would say this doesn't happen anymore.
No.
It would have been very, very timely, especially considering everything that's happening in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like I said, racism being one of the pillars of the American culture. We live in one of the greatest countries in the world with great freedoms. But with great freedoms come with a lot of underlying things that are still unresolved. And especially in this generation, in this era, where nothing is under the rug. It's all out in the open. We just have all of these unanswered questions that are out in the open now. But seriously, guys, we had fun with this episode. It was we got to laugh, we got to think, we got to
and
watch.
We should stress that even though this was probably the heaviest podcast we have done, and this is the heaviest episode that we've seen so far, it was still a really funny episode.
Yeah.
And they chocked a lot in here, both of the funny and the dramatic. And they moved it at a lightning pace the entire time and made this feel like a full, complete episode. You never had moments where you thought, really, is this happening? Everything felt very fluid. And only with us taking the time to really dissect it and look at it and stop watching for a moment and look at each individual scene, did we really come to these conclusions. If you just were able to sit down and watch this episode, you would be able to be entertained by it and not necessarily need the racial undertones. And it's the most important thing to talk about is the fact that we really are going in and doing heavy dissection of the episode, because we saw something for the first time on this episode, and I'm trying to pull it up right now.
Oh, yeah, well, drum roll, please. In case you didn't know, obviously we do our research because we're doing this podcast, and we love to have you listen to it and feel informed. But if we do our research, obviously the show has to do their research.
Which was why they have someone working for the show. His name is Benny Richburg Jr.
Now, Benny Richburg Jr., do you think a executive accountant, maybe
legal,
Maybe PA.
Perhaps.
Maybe junior producer?
No.
None of those?
None of them. His actual title in the credits, West Philly Homeboy Consultant.
I'm sorry. Okay. The name again.
Benny Richburg Jr.
Now, Richburg Jr., that does not sound like he's from Philadelphia. That sounds from like he's from Connecticut or maybe Michigan.
Nope, he is the West Philly Homeboy Consultant. I don't even know what to make of this.
It's just such an anomaly. It's like if you had Lamar Johnson as the Bel Air. What would you call it? We can't call it Homeboy. We would have to call it. I don't even know what would you call it if we would have flipped that title? Please tell us how we could flip that title.
I mean, realistically, you'd be calling it the White Collar Crime Consultant.
I mean, but that's too harsh. We need to find something adjacent to Homeboy that deals with Bel Air.
And I almost feel like it might have been a prank because he was a consultant initially, but he was later a writer and a producer and a story editor on the show. So this might have just been one of those things where he came in initially and just didn't have a real title, but they wanted to give him sort of a special shout out because he did write episodes.
Yeah, oh, of course. I mean, you can't be around that show without being a part of the episode, but just that is your introduction title. That almost sounds like an internship hazing title. God.
Yeah, that's true.
It kind of does. It's like being named Pinky or something in some kind of frat. But that's just my thoughts. I could be completely wrong here.
No, you're completely right. I just want to know, what was that negotiation like more than anything else? I mean, how do you go into that? It's like, okay, we're going to have you in the writer's room, but you're not going to get any WGA credit or residuals, but we'll give you credit. Well, what are you going to call me? It's like, West Philly Homeboy Consultant. You're going to have to pay me a lot of money to walk away with that title.
and that's what I was about to say. Took the words right out of my mouth. With a name like that, you got to negotiate the check.
And
I mean, Rich is in your name.
But here's what's amazing more than anything else. This show does have a history of changing people's titles over the seasons. Initially, Jazz was credited by his stage name, DJ Jazzy Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, it became Jeffrey A. Towns.
Yeah.
If we go back to a previous episode from 2 weeks ago, Not With My Pig You Don't, where Uncle Phil's mom and dad show up, he's not credited as Benny Richburg Jr.
Huh?
He's credited as Benny Boomps.
See, this all goes back to he might have been the intern. He might have been there on an intern basis.
Maybe, but I mean, the guy has legitimate credits. There's no question. I mean, he was a writer for Martin Lawrence. He was a writer for the Jamie Foxx show. This guy appears to be legitimate, but his name is Benny Boomps.
I mean, at some point that had to be some kind of hazing. Or some kind of jokingly. Because, I mean, it almost slipped by us.
I guess. Benny, if you're listening, please, by all means, hit us up, sofreshsoprince@gmail.com. You can tweet at us. You can send us a message on our Facebook page. You can direct message us on Instagram. All these are acceptable ways. Please, let us know what was this process like, and we will give you your time on the podcast. We will turn this into a 4-hour episode if you're willing to come and sit down and talk to us. And as we've said, we're mobile. We can go to you.
because if you don't, you leave us open to speculation, and that is a very vast place, and I have a very wide imagination.
Many booms.
And we'll just save time for Benny Booms.
All right. So, other than Benny Booms, Lorenzo, what did we take away from this episode?
I think it's a black thing. It's definitely a black thing, and you know, sometimes the reality is really stranger than anything else, because you know, if you were a cop and you were to pull somebody over and they say, "Oh, my butler, they hung up on me, and my high power attorney dad," you know, I mean, these are all strange things that are people's real lives, but you know, sometimes it just, you end up in weird situations and people don't believe how strange your life can be.
And I think we're just gonna have to leave it right there.
Yeah.
Thank you guys all so much for listening. Shout out again to cousin McJeffrey, who's really been hitting us up on the Twitter. We love you for listening, and we love that nice little shout out you gave us. Callie K, you favorited one of our tweets, and we always appreciate that. If you're not following us on Twitter, what are you waiting for? We're putting out great pictures, great little tidbits. We are on Facebook. You can like us there. You can follow us on Instagram.
Overbrook is listening to what we're saying. They're bringing back the show.
You should go on to iTunes, rate us 5 stars, leave a nice comment, like us on SoundCloud, follow us on SoundCloud. All of these are things that we can do together. Because if you want that fresh reboot for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air for the 2016 season, you gotta keep coming back. You just gotta keep coming back.
So that way it stays fresh.
And Prince.
Yeah. See what we did there?
We did it well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. Unless you have any imparting wisdom that you would like to put on, you know.
I'm just gonna go out with a little. When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go.
So fresh.
Go
so
down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go.
So Fresh, So Prince is a Mitten from the Apple production, produced by Andrew Apple and Lorenzo Gordon. Music by Griffey Major.